The ATF, it's one of the 4 major Department of Justice agencies. You know, you got the FBI, everybody knows who the FBI is. The DEA, they deal with the drugs. FBI is more like criminal investigation. You have the United States Marshal Service, who hunt down fugitives. And then you also have the ATF, which is who I'm interning with. They got started back during Prohibition when bootlegging was real popular. And if you've ever seen the movie The Untouchables, that's the beginning of the ATF. They were the ones that hunted down these bootleggers, you know, was dealing with alcohol primarily. And they got into like cigarette taxing, you know, bringing in cigarettes that were untaxed into the country. And now they're mostly famous for firearms. Felons that have guns, people that have like these automatic machine guns, stuff like that. We're the ones that regulate, you know, the sale of guns. If you go in to buy a gun, you know, you have to register. As an intern, there's a lot of stuff that I can't do just because I'm technically a citizen. So I can't like do some of the stuff that the special agents can do just because it's a huge danger risk. When I first came there, I was basically like processed in the office, shown how to do paperwork, you know, answer the phone, direct calls, do stuff like that. That was only for about a week or so, though. Then I started getting to do a lot more fun stuff. Like the 3rd day I was there, we went to the Western Kentucky Law Enforcement Conference, and we was there with the FBI, the Marshals, the DEA, the Secret Service, and it was just this huge room. We all talked. I think it was 8 hours long. We was basically just giving each other information on how better to serve the country, serve our state, and serve people in general, how to help people with their needs, how best to, you know, fight crime in certain areas. So I got to do that. That was really cool. It was good to network with a lot of these guys. I also got to go to the gun range with them. They was, you know, shooting shotguns, M4 assault rifles, got to work with riot shields, handguns. So I got to do that. That was really fun. And then also I've got to go out with some of the agents undercover to these stores that were accused of selling guns illegally without a license. Got to go in with the agents, act like we was wanting to buy a gun, and then, you know, kind of show them who we were afterwards. I've got to do probably one of the 2 funnest things I got to do. At one point, we had to serve a warrant to a suspect, and we had a joint task force. We hit 4 different places at once. It was us, the Marshal Service, the county police, and the city police. It was in a different county besides Warren. And anyways, I got to go to one of the locations, and there was about a 10-man group with each one. Got to wear a bulletproof vest, and we basically just went in, kicked their door in, and you know, served the warrant. Afterwards, I got to, you know, put on some gloves and search for evidence. So we were searching the house. We found guns. We found dope. We found like a lot of money. I don't know if I could say how much, but we've had a lot of money. And I mean, I got to be part of that. For a 22-year-old guy, you know, you don't get to do that every day. So that was almost worth the entire internship experience that day. Probably the only other thing that was more fun than that was cat training. We went down to a dojo, and it's basically hand-to-hand combat. So we learned a lot of Muay Thai techniques, Krav Maga techniques. We got to, you know, kind of wrestle around with each other and, you know, do these moves. And like a lot of it, you know, we weren't, you know, easy on each other. You know, we was trying to push each other. So, I mean, it got kind of rough, you know, sometimes. But I didn't have to do that. They said, you know, it kind of took a lot of push for me to get to do it, because at first they didn't want me to do it. But I kept on, kept on, kept on. They finally let me do it. So, I mean, it was a blast. And then we did other scenarios, you know, where you're off duty and you go and get some lunch. And of course, most federal agents are wearing street clothes. You go and get some lunch and you come out and somebody's been shot. You hear a gunshot and there's a guy laying on the ground. He's shot and he's bleeding and he's got a gun. And it's like, what are you supposed to do? Like, is this guy somebody that tried robbing somebody and got shot? Is he a victim? He tried to protect himself when he pulled out his gun, but he got, you know, you don't know what's going on. And so basically they was just testing us to see how we would react in that situation. With the Sons of Anarchy, if you watch it, I'm a pretty big fan of it. Throughout the show, one of their enemies is the ATF. because, you know, the Sons of Anarchy are in the business of running guns. So that's in direct, you know, the counterbalance of the ATF's job. So that's kind of interesting because I loved that show. That was before I even started it. But, you know, when I got on with ATF, there are actually, you know, motorcycle gangs that we watch and that we've been involved with that do sell guns. I mean, it's just like Sons of Anarchy. They have these clubhouses, you know, they have their patches, you know, I mean, they're real serious about it. And, I mean, so it's like I kind of got to see that point of view flip-flopped. Any class I've had, whether it be the white-collar crime, criminology, penology, you know, organized crime, all of them have had a little bit that I've used in my internship. You know, there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of laws that I had an idea of what they were going into it. You know, if I would have went into this just without any prior knowledge of criminal stuff, first of all, I wouldn't have even known who the ATF were or what they'd done, you know. But a lot of like the laws, drug laws, theories in crime, you know, you can kind of think about this stuff and apply it to these real world scenarios. So everything my professors have ever taught me that's been in the back of my mind, you know, I'm not saying that I'm like, you know everything that's going on, because there's a lot you have to learn that requires real world experience, not just, you know, the classroom. But having that classroom experience was really good for any time there was, you know, a scenario where, you know, you were thinking of a law, or you were trying to think, you know, like, you know, what's this guy trying to do? You know, what theory would go with this? You know, stuff like that. It was really good for that. And then especially, like the organized crime, it talked a lot about, like, biker gangs. These other gangs that, you know, maybe they're in the business of guns or drugs. And the ATF, you know, they're the ones that go after these organizations that are in the business of selling guns illegally. So with that, a lot of these people that the ATF are familiar with were groups that I was familiar with, because I already knew going into it who these guys were, what they done, what their, you know, the theme of that group is, I guess you could say, you know, what they were all about. So that was really helpful. One thing you got to be prepared for if you're going to go into this federal level law enforcement is you got to be ready to move and be willing to move. You know, I'm from Albany, Kentucky. There's not going to be any places back home where I could work, you know. So I don't know where I'll be when I graduate. You know, I could be in California, New York, Texas, you know, wherever, Washington, D.C. It's just wherever, whoever will take me, that's where I'm willing to go. So as long as you're willing to go and move, that's one of the main keys you need to be willing to do if you're wanting to go into this. So whenever I first came to Western, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I done 2 years at community college. I came here, I thought, yeah, maybe I'll be a history teacher because I liked history. And I didn't know what I really wanted to do with my life. And I took a criminal justice course just for the heck of it because I had a spare class to take. Anyways, and I was in that class and it just clicked. Like, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, I kind of had talked to some people, you know, they're like, well, what do you want to do when you get out of school, John? And I was like, well, you know, I'm wanting to be a special agent in federal law enforcement. When you say that, everybody kind of, you know, they kind of laugh or, you know, snicker. And a lot of people think it's untouchable. You know, you can't be a special agent. You know, people think, oh, you can't work with the FBI or the ATF. You know, that's impossible. And it isn't. If you have the drive and the, you know, if you set that goal to do it, you can do it. So I made that my goal. And I mean, I still got a long way to go, obviously, but I made that my goal that I was going to prove those people wrong, and that's what I was going to do. That's what I want to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So I get online and I start searching, and a lot of people saying, you know, you need to have some experience. You need to have some experience to get on with this, because, you know, they're not going to just take you if you just graduate. And, you know, I mean, it's pivotal to have a 4-year degree, but they want a little experience too. So I get on there, and I just kept seeing the stuff pop up about internships. People saying, you know, what advice would you give me? I'm in college now, and everybody's like, internships, internships. So I'm like, okay, you know, that would help me separate myself from everybody I'm in class with. Because if you think about it, your classmates, they're your competition. I'm friends with them, but those 30 people in that criminology class, that's 30 people I'm going to have to compete with for a job. And I want to win. You know, I want that job. I got 3 credit hours for the internship, so I mean, that's awesome. But I mean, I would have, if I could have done it without getting the grade, I would have, just because, you know, I really wanted to get that experience under my belt, because now my resume has that I worked with ATF, and I can list a lot of this stuff that I got to do, you know. Whenever I apply for a federal job, I can say, you know, if they said, have you ever had any investigative experience? Well, yeah, I've had to go through, you know, phone records of people that are, you know, drug dealers and gun dealers, and I've had to match up names and numbers, you know. I've had to check seized money, their serial numbers in relation to the money that we gave them whenever our undercover agents, you know, went to a drug buy, and, you know, match up the numbers, see, you know, when we busted this guy, did he have our money in his wallet? You know, I've got to do that sort of stuff. I've got to, you know, do these house warrants, you know, go on these things. You know, I've got that experience now, so it's so pivotal to have that compared to just walking in and being like, well, I have absolutely zero experience, but, you know, I took these classes. But like I said, though, the classes are really important, but you got to have a mix. You know, you got to have some experience to go with it. When I had penology with Dr. Bolander, we got to go to Eddyville State Prison, which was really, really cool. Thankfully, this is the first time I ever went to prison. So we got to go in a group, and we got to tour the prison. We got to go through, got to walk the yards. That was pretty surreal. I mean, it was just like a movie, you know. You've seen all these guys out there, you know, lifting weights, and we had some girls with us in the group, and they started kind of like, you know, hollering at the girls and whistling and stuff. But I mean, it was really interesting experience. It's kind of eye-opening too, you know. You just think like, I tried picturing, when I was walking through the yard, picturing, you know, like, what if I was a prisoner? Like, this is my first day. Like, this is what you would be faced with, you know, for 30 years or, you know, however long you're there. And it was pretty surreal. We went and got to check out the lethal injection room. Got to see that. We got to go through the cafeteria and see the food. I've seen dogs eat better than the food there. When we first got there, they had 2 prisoners. I'm assuming they were on, like, good behavior or something like that, because they was wearing, they were coated by different colors, different color jumpsuits or whatever. They had on like a green, I want to say, and they were kind of roaming free a little bit. They were older. I'm assuming they'd been there for several decades, and they were probably weren't a threat anymore. But anyways, they kind of talked to us when we first got there, and we was waiting to get processed in. When you first got there, you had to take your shoes off, take your pockets out. You couldn't bring a watch. You couldn't bring a necklace. You couldn't bring anything. I mean, you had to take everything out, your cell phone out. I mean, then they searched you, you know, by sex. You know, the girls had to go in one area, the guys had to go another area, and you got searched. I mean, they were really thorough about, you know, you not bringing anything in that could ever be used as a weapon, because they can find a way to make just about anything a weapon. We got to see later on all these different shanks and knives, and this guy made a gun out of, it was like wood and some sort of electrical wire. He had made like a full-fledged gun out of it, working gun. I mean, just the craziest stuff. I mean, I guess when you're locked up like that, you got tons of time to think about stuff. But anyways, we got to talk to them, but they said that the prisoners out in the yard, they said not to talk to. They said if they try talking to you, don't say anything to them, don't look at them, don't, you know. So we just pretty much ignored them for the most part, you know. I mean, it was pretty wild stuff, though. It was awesome. It was a great experience.